Hey dancers, today we're talking about coping with cravings. I put this up on Instagram the other day and I wanted to know when you're craving something, what do you typically do? Do you give in to the craving or do you try to totally avoid it? I would say there's probably a middle ground in there as well, where rather than give in to the craving, you might try and find something more healthy that would satisfy it, or just come up with an alternative to cope with the craving. My number one tip with cravings might surprise you. It's to give in. Why do I say this? I say this because one of the number one things that I see with dancers is a little bit of restriction throughout the day, where perhaps you're eating less than what you actually need, but you think that's what you are supposed to be doing in order to maintain a ballet body. So you're going under what you actually need to sustain yourself and to feel satisfied by your food. And then you get to the end of the day and you are so hungry that you just kind of eat everything in sight, to varying levels. Maybe you're eating tons of healthy food, but you still feel like you can't stop and like the hunger is insatiable and you just can't find the end. So since that is such a common thing, I think that giving in to cravings is really important for the same reason. If you try to completely avoid a food or you try to fill that craving in with something else or, an alternative, maybe a healthier alternative, whatever it might be, odds are that craving, that desire for a certain food, whatever it might be, whether it's chocolate, peanut butter, cake, cookies, bagels, bread, I'm trying to think of all the things we typically crave and feel like we shouldn't be eating. All of those things, when we crave them and we don't give in and we try to avoid it, it usually will lead to that same situation where you go completely overboard and eat way more of that food than you wanted to. I see this a lot too, and this was something that I experienced most commonly with nut butter, where I just thought, oh, there's too much fat in it, I shouldn't be eating much of it, I should just avoid it altogether. And then if I was alone with a jar of nut butter and I had been trying to avoid it for long enough, I would just go crazy on it and eat half the jar, way too much, a quarter of the jar, way more nut butter than a human would need in a single sitting. I just go totally overboard. So I think you should give in to your cravings. Now, I don't think that when you're craving cheesecake that you need to go out and, buy a whole cheesecake. But if you're craving cheesecake, maybe you make a date with a friend, you go to the cheesecake factory, you eat a healthy meal before you make one of their healthier choices, and then you order a piece of cheesecake to share with your friend. And then this is the next key. Whatever the food craving was and whatever it is you've decided to give in on, you need to think and go very slow and think about how quickly you can be satisfied with that food. Now, cheesecake is very rich. To eat a whole piece of cheesecake or even half a piece of cheesecake with a friend after you've eaten an entire meal probably is going to give you a stomach ache. Like, that's typically going to be too much food. So you might be satisfied after 2 or 3 bites, maybe 3 or 4 bites. It's going to depend on the night and the situation and the craving and whatever the craving food was. But you need to go real slow and pay attention to when that craving is satisfied. And to be honest, sometimes you'll get in that situation, you'll have a bite of it and you'll be like, this actually isn't that good. Maybe it tastes too sweet. Maybe it's more sugar than you would have used if you made it at home. You'll start to notice those things. Your taste buds will get more keen to flavors and more aware of satisfaction and little differences in taste that you may or may not like. When you're giving into your cravings, you become a person who has a higher standard for quality in desserts and sweets and these rich or indulgent foods because you allow yourself to eat them. So you know what it tastes like when it's absolutely excellent, and you know what it tastes like when it's not so good. For me, one of those cravings that I'll typically give into is when I'm at a wedding and there's cake. I usually want to try the cake. However, if you've been to weddings, you know sometimes the cake is great and other times it's not. People put different levels of importance on things like cake at their wedding. So I'll go really slow. I'll make sure that I had some of the dinner or whatever healthier food was available earlier in the night. I always eat my whole salad, things like that. Once it comes to the time for cake, I'll have a bite. I'll decide if I think it's good or not. Maybe I'll take a second bite. I really like icing, so I make sure to assess the icing and decide if I think it's excellent and worth eating another bite. But I go really slow, and sometimes I'm satisfied with just one or two bites. Sometimes, depending on the size of the piece of cake, I will continue to eat a little bit more of it if it's really excellent. But it's rare that I would finish a whole piece of cake because I tend to find the satisfaction earlier than finishing cake. And like I said, once again, when you allow yourself to have those things pretty much whenever you crave or desire them, you'll have a much easier time stopping early in the situation. So I talked about an example with this too on Instagram the other day where I really love grapefruit juice, but I don't think that straight up fruit juice is a healthy thing to consume, especially in large quantities and especially every single day. So I'll buy a small container of grapefruit juice, and then when I want some, I pour myself a little glass, and honestly, it's usually 2 or 3 sips. I have that little glass, and then my grapefruit juice needs are satisfied. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If any of you are the ones who completely avoid the food, then I would love to know what you think about trying to allow yourself to give in to some of those cravings. And if you're one of the ones who tends to give in, I'd love to know your thoughts on being more moderate with indulging and how you think that might work for you, or if you do think it's going to work for you. Share in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you had any aha moments, go ahead and share them with us as well. And we'll be in touch soon.